The rise and fall of emperors can shape the fate of entire civilizations. Nowhere is this more evident than in the life of Nero, Rome's infamous ruler, whose legacy is one of tyranny, excess, and bloodshed. His death would plunge the empire into chaos, ushering in a year of unimaginable turmoil, the year of the four emperors. Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. 1 Peter, verse 5. Nero, born Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus, became emperor in AD 54 after the suspicious death of his stepfather, Emperor Claudius. Many believed his ambitious mother, Agrippina the Younger, had poisoned Claudius to secure the throne for her son. At just 16 years old, Nero was the youngest emperor Rome had ever seen. In the early years of his reign, he was guided by wise advisors like Seneca and Burrus. But as his thirst for power and indulgence grew, he cast aside all restraint. He had his own mother executed, then his wife, and then anyone who stood in his way. But perhaps the most notorious of Nero's crimes was his brutal persecution of Christians. In AD 64, a great fire devastated Rome, burning for 6 days and consuming much of the city. Rumours spread that Nero himself had ordered the fire to clear space for his grand new palace, the Domus Aurea. Seeking a scapegoat, Nero pointed the blame at the Christians, a small but growing sect in the empire. He subjected them to horrific punishments. Some were torn apart by wild animals, others crucified, and many were burned alive as torches to light his gardens at night. His cruelty earned him a place of infamy among early Christian and secular writers alike, who saw in him a monstrous figure of persecution. We have the following quote from Tacitus, widely regarded as one of the greatest Roman historians by modern scholars. But all human efforts, all the lavish gifts of the emperor, and the propitiations of the gods did not banish the sinister belief that the conflagration was the result of an order. Consequently, to get rid of the rapport, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate, and a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome, where all things hideous and shameful from every part of the world find their centre and become popular. Accordingly, an arrest was first made of all who pleaded guilty. Then, upon their information, an immense multitude was convicted, not so much of the crime of firing the city, as of hatred against mankind. Mockery of every sort was added to their deaths. Covered with the skins of beasts, they were torn by dogs and perished, or were nailed to crosses, or were doomed to the flames and burnt, to serve as a nightly illumination, when daylight had expired. Nero offered his gardens for the spectacle and was exhibiting a show in the circus while he mingled with the people in the dress of a charioteer or stood aloft on a car. Hence, even for criminals who deserved extreme and exemplary punishment, there arose a feeling of compassion, for it was not, as it seemed, for the public good, but to glut one man's cruelty that they were being destroyed. Tacitus Annals 15:44. Many have speculated that Nero was the infamous beast mentioned in the book of Revelation, and no wonder when we read what historians say about the man. For example, we have a quote by a Greek sophist of the Roman imperial period. "In my travels, which have been wider than any man yet accomplished, I have seen many, many wild beasts of Arabia and India. But this beast, that is commonly called a tyrant, I know not how many heads it has, nor if it be crooked of claw and armed with horrible fangs. And of wild beasts you cannot say that they were ever known to eat their own mother. But Nero has gorged himself on this diet." Philostratus, Life of Apollonius, page 438. From the historian Suetonius, we also read, "Nero was no less cruel to strangers than to members of his family. A comet, popularly supposed to herald the death of some person of outstanding importance, appeared several nights running and greatly disturbed him. His astrologer, Balbillus, observed that monarchs usually avoided portents of this kind by executing their most prominent subjects and thus directing the wrath of heaven elsewhere. So Nero resolved on a wholesale massacre of the nobility. What fortified him in this decision and seemed to justify it was that he had discovered two plots against his life. The earlier and more important one of the two was Piso's conspiracy in Rome. The other, detected at Beneventum, had been headed by Vinicius. When brought up for trial, the conspirators were loaded with 3 sets of chains. Some, while admitting their guilt, claimed that by destroying a man so thoroughly steeped in evil as Nero, they would have been doing him the greatest possible service. All children of the condemned men were banished from Rome and then starved to death or poisoned. After this, nothing could restrain Nero from murdering anyone he pleased, on whatever pretext. Suetonius, Lives of the 12 Caesars, Nero, pages 36 and 37. Nero indeed is the prime candidate for this biblical figure of evil. His name, when written in Hebrew letters, adds up to 666, the number of the beast. According to author J. Rogers, there is a textual variant in some early copies of Revelation that has the reader count the number of the beast as 616, Caesar Nero, and not the Aramaic 666, Kaiser Neron. The connection goes deeper. Revelation describes a beast that was and is not and is to come. After Nero's death, rumours persisted that he had not truly died and would return to reclaim the throne. This so-called Nero Redivivus legend fueled the belief that he was more than a mere man. He was an agent of chaos itself. But Nero's reign could not last forever. His erratic behaviour, heavy taxation, and brutal executions alienated the Senate and the army. In AD 68, the Senate declared him a public enemy. Fleeing for his life, Nero ultimately took his own life, reportedly uttering the words, "What an artist dies in me." With his death, the Julio-Claudian dynasty came to an end, and Rome descended into chaos. What followed was one of the most turbulent years in Roman history, the year of the 4 emperors. First came Galba, a seasoned but unpopular general who ruled for only a few months before being assassinated by the Praetorian Guard. His successor, Otho, fared no better. He faced immediate opposition from Vitellius, a general backed by the powerful legions of the Rhine. After a brief civil war, Otho took his own life, making way for Vitellius to take the throne. But his rule was marked by decadence and disorder. Meanwhile, in the east, another contender emerged, Vespasian. A brilliant military commander, Vespasian had been leading Rome's war against the Jewish rebellion in Judea. His legions declared him emperor, and with the support of the eastern provinces, he marched on Rome, leaving the Judean campaign to his son Titus. Vitellius was captured and executed, and in December of AD 69, Vespasian secured the throne. The year of the 4 emperors exposed the fragility of Rome's imperial system. The Senate was powerless, the legions held the true authority, and the empire teetered on the brink of collapse. But from the ashes of civil war, Vespasian emerged as a stabilizing force. He founded the Flavian dynasty and restored order to Rome. Yet, as Vespasian ascended the throne, the war in Judea raged on, a war that would reach its climax in the coming years. The story of Nero and the year of the 4 emperors is one of ambition, betrayal, and the unpredictable nature of power. It set the stage for the final destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. And as Rome burned, as emperors rose and fell, the fate of the Jewish people and the early Christians hung in the balance. From Josephus we read, "Accordingly Vespasian, looking upon himself as already entrusted with the government, got all things ready for his journey. Now fame carried this news abroad, more suddenly than one could have thought, that he was emperor over all the East, upon which every city kept festivals and celebrated sacrifices and oblations for such good news." On reaching Alexandria, Vespasian was greeted by the good news from Rome and by embassies of congratulation from every quarter of the world, now his own, the whole empire being now secured and the Roman state saved beyond expectation. Vespasian turned his thoughts to what remained in Judea. Josephus, War of the Jews, 4:11-5. But it would transpire that the Jews had something more than just Rome to contend with. They had their own worst enemy, themselves.